Welcome, Mike. It is a great honor to have you on my show today.
Liz, thanks so much for having me. I'm really excited to get into this topic. Pumped to talk to your audience.
Absolutely. Now, before we dive in, I just want to mention, so in your bio, it says that you have reinvented yourself many times and that you don't have a career calling. Can we begin by you sharing about the different careers that you've had in your lifetime?
Yeah, sure. So first off, I'm 41, so I'm kind of like right in the spot, for this topic. And I have a little bit of a story. Like when I was in college, I think I was probably a junior. My dad came to me and he said, "Well, what are you gonna do?" Like I hadn't even had my major planned out yet. And I just distinctly remembered saying to him, I don't know, but I'm pretty sure I'm going to do a whole bunch of different things and I'm going to be successful. And that was about the direction that I had. So I think like kind of fast forwarding today, look, I started my career as a futures trader in Chicago. So kind of being, in charge of buy, sell decisions, like Wall Street type trading scenario. I was the COO of a business startup that built electronics for space flight. I got into SEO and content marketing for a long time and kind of built a name for myself there. I moved over into the Fortune 500, corporate world as an innovation consultant for several years. And now I'm kind of back into entrepreneurship as a business owner, kind of combining some of my previous investing skill set with that content marketing background that I have. And I'm probably going to reinvent myself a whole bunch of times before it's all over. I really always tell people like I still don't know what I want to do when I grow up. So that's kind of my quick story.
I love that. I work at a university with liberal arts and sciences students. And that's the question they get a lot. What are you going to do with that major? What are you going to do when you grow up? And what I love about your career trajectory is that it's fluid and that you can essentially do wherever you gravitate, and you have the skill set that has allowed you to tap into a variety of industries and areas. That's fascinating. Now, Mike, not everybody feels or believes that they can do that, right? I think it takes some kind of personality and ambition. I think everyone can do it, but maybe they don't have the confidence. And so I really wanted to do an episode on tips for professionals over the age of 40, because for some folks, maybe they haven't been on the job market for a while. Maybe they've been in their place of employment for 15 years and they're like, well, what is this like? What are the new trends? Or they hear about ageism and discrimination. So I know that today you'll be sharing 7 tips for professionals over the age of 40 who are ready to enter the job market. Can you kick us off with the first tip?
Yeah, sure. So, I think for this age range, especially, I guess, from my experience, it's all about your network and really leaning on your network. So, between 50 and 70% of jobs, depending on what the surveys that you look at, are filled really before they're posted. So having that network and being able to reach out to people and meet new people to find opportunities is really like kind of the number one tip. And I think as a seasoned professional in our age range, we've built some time, hopefully not only acquiring professional skills, but meeting people that we can kind of reach out and start with, when we're starting the networking process.
Yeah. And I think that's so important. And I feel like that is something that we hear a lot is really tapping into your network. I want to ask a follow-up question with this here. I work with a lot of people who will say, I'm afraid to ask for help, or I'm embarrassed. I lost my job. I don't want people knowing that I've lost my job, or I just don't want people knowing that I'm interested in this industry. What do you say to people who might not be ready, or they don't feel like they're ready to start tapping into their network or even just a network in general?
Yeah, it kind of depends, I think, on what the reason is for the holdback or the embarrassment. I mean, for somebody who's lost their job and may feel embarrassed about that, I think the mindset of like, the world is really dynamic and things happen. And they happen a lot more frequently than maybe you even realize. I've been fired. I've been fired, twice by clients and in an actual employment situation. Like, layoffs happen and it might not be your fault, right? So that just can happen. I think the other reason why people really struggle with reaching out is a lot of times they don't think about their network until they need it.
Mm.
And at that point in time, it's I'm asking for something from everybody instead of I'm building value into the future of my network. So I think sometimes there's a little bit of that those sort of mental gymnastics that people just sort of have to get through and get over to start utilizing the network. So I mean, I think the easiest way to do this is just starting with your absolute closest best friends, right? Like even if they're not in the let's say the industry that you're looking to get into, you do this by repetition and just getting even any type of feedback on kind of home court, if you will, is just a great place to start, I think.
That's a great point. I think start out with your immediate network and just kind of let it snowball from there and getting warmed up. That's a great tip. All right. So tip number 2, you talk about LinkedIn and polishing up your profile. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think utilizing LinkedIn is just an extension of your network. LinkedIn is a absolutely built for networking, and it's also sort of the digital resume, if you will. Plus, I like to say it's a digital resume plus personality. I don't even know why we use actual kind of hard copy resumes anymore, other than to check a box.
Mm-hmm.
So I think in terms of utilizing LinkedIn, there are lots of great articles on sort of best practices and how to actually do that. I advise people just go straight to the source. Google, LinkedIn profile, and there's a great article on there, from LinkedIn itself. And, a couple of things are really like, utilize a great headline and avoid buzzwords. Like those are just kind of like two really quick things. So utilize a headline that kind of says more about you than just I am product marketer in at X, Y, and Z company. I think when I was in corporate consulting, my headline was I sit at the intersection of entrepreneurship and corporatism, and I got so many comments on that, and people were like, "Oh, I want to steal that," or I'm going to tweak it this way for mine or something. But like, it was short and interesting enough that people were like, "Oh, that's I want to learn more." So utilizing kind of a headline as the first thing that people see about you, and then just other types of things like utilize a good picture, right? Like have a picture, utilize a picture, the summary of yourself, tell the story about you. Tell what that is about you and who you are as a person and as a professional. Those are just some like really quick tips, but I think like just going straight to the source and LinkedIn, there's plenty of videos where you can get like kind of step-by-step, really good tactical, pointers on really polishing up your LinkedIn resume.
Yeah. So, yeah, like you said, there's a ton of resources out there. And I feel that LinkedIn can be very overwhelming, especially for someone who maybe hasn't really scratched the surface and maybe just has an account. And so you talk about the main points is having that headline, showing your personality, having a good quality headshot, putting your about me. Now, in your experience, in, maybe interacting with employers, recruiters, and clients, what are some things, especially in thinking about people that are over the age of 40, what are some of the things that can really help them stand out in not just their profile, but how they use LinkedIn? What are some ways to really, be visible?
Yeah, I mean, not everybody wants to create content on LinkedIn, right? And be one of those people that's constantly putting stuff out there. I do that. I think it's valuable for what we do, but not everybody wants to do that. But there are lots of other ways. Like, I mean, you can there's a section where you can showcase some of your work product. You can talk about certain projects that and kind of showcase projects that you've worked on with other people. You can ask for and receive recommendations from previous, bosses, coworkers, friends about you. And that just kind of sits on there as social proof for any would-be, hiring manager or company to come in here and say, oh, wow, Liz, you've got a whole bunch of people that are recommending your work in a public way. So I think those are some things where you can kind of showcase. And then I actually to kind of take it a step further, utilizing, actually proactively reaching out to people and to hiring managers specifically and saying, hey, like, I applied for this job. I would love to buy you coffee. Maybe this isn't the right job, but like, I would love to network and understand, your company's needs more. I've done that. I know a lot of people who have done that. And, the response rate on that versus a cold email, in my experience, you get about like a 25% response rate on LinkedIn, and maybe it's a 2 or 3% response rate, via email. So the platform is set up to network, and generally people want to help. And there's just lots of ways to be kind of out there and proactive.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I think a lot of people are afraid to not just reach out to professionals, but to recruiters. But recruiters have said, reach out to me, obviously professionally, and you just never know who's willing to connect and actually give you some time. So I think it's a great way to step out of your comfort zone. That's a great tip. Thank you. I know we can do an entire episode just on LinkedIn, but that's definitely an important component of the job search process. Definitely. All right. So for tip number 3, you say be picky. Can you please elaborate on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, from my own experience, I think one of the biggest mistakes later stage professionals make are, we have more responsibility generally, right? Like, we have kids, and if we lose a job or we're uncertain about the future, that panic sets in a little bit, right? Like, I gotta figure this out. I gotta solve this problem now. And I think what happens is people tend to rationalize that into trying to fit themselves into whatever opportunity is kind of coming across their plate, instead of, really being proactive and doing the work to find the exact right fit. And I think what happens when you do that, like, let's say I'm a vice president, and all of a sudden, like, a project manager role comes around, right? And I'm like, yes, I'm overqualified, but here's all the things that I can bring to the table. It often makes the person sound desperate, I think, and it's a little bit off-putting. And I'll just give a quick example. When I was working in corporate consulting, we had a gentleman who came in for an interview because my direct report said, or my boss said, hey, like, interview this guy. And he comes in and he says, like, I'm one of the founding, kind of like one of the founding members of this like $500 million startup. And he's in here applying for like a project manager role. And it made it just did not compute at all. It made no sense. And I went to my boss, I'm like, this doesn't make any sense. Like, why? Like, there's got to be more to this story. Like, why is this happening? And he didn't get the job because it just wasn't a fit. Now, that's a pretty crazy discrepancy, I think, maybe or I guess example. But I think the lesson is pause, like, slow down and put more effort into finding your right fit, because they're out there. than just trying to like, bang a square peg into a round hole.
No, that's right on point. I know I hear this a lot from some of the job seekers and clients that I've worked with, where they're like, Liz, I'm applying to this, but they're telling me I'm overqualified, and that's because they're applying to similar roles. But like you said, this is really the time to reset and really self-reflect and think about, okay, what is my next move, and having that confidence. And you also mentioned like being patient in taking your career maybe to that next level, and maybe this is the time to do that. So really having the confidence in all those years of experience in making that that next level move. That's great. Okay, so for tip number 4, this one's interesting. So you say send a video resume.
Yeah, so a video resume or something that's going to kind of make you stand out, right? This is like sort of unlocking some creativity, thinking outside of the box, because the hard reality is, a very small percentage of resumes even get looked at. And if yours does happen to get looked at, it needs to really capture the attention, right? So I ended up interviewing somebody about video resumes for my podcast, and I was like, man, that's really interesting approach. And so how I think about it is, you're actually sending like the cover letter you would want to write. So in a video form, right? So highly personable. This is who I am. This is what I'm about, rather than here are my, qualifications and credentials. And the whole point is, it's a different medium. It's a different way to kind of approach a hiring manager that stands out. And so there's a couple interesting platforms. The gentleman that I interviewed works for crash.co, and they have kind of a whole platform to do that. Another way is Loom. So Loom, I utilize extensively with my team, where we run a remote team, and I use it. It's just super easy to record yourself or your screen and send links, basically just like Google Docs. And so you can embed that right in an email. You can send a link in a LinkedIn DM to somebody, and it's super easy, super simple, and it stands out. Another really interesting, I wish I could find this again. I saw this on LinkedIn somewhere. A person actually used Venmo to get a job. So the person was a cop. Yeah, this is so slick. The person was going for a copywriting job. Okay. And what the person did was, he found out who the hiring manager was somehow, I'm not sure how, and found out like that they were on Venmo, and triangulated their Venmo handle to the right person. And he sent a request for money. He sent a request for $50,000 for a copywriting job, and wrote some, pithy little comment. And sure enough, like, he got interviewed, because that's just such a novel approach. It's just
brilliant.
You would never expect it. There's so much creativity in that. And so I think like that, finding ways to just stand out from the pile, rather than just submitting your resume through, the job site or the job board, just can go a long way to you getting more interviews.
I really like this tip. And when I saw that, I'm thinking, wow, I've never done anything like that. But I do want to ask, because like, if I'm listening to this and I'm like, all right, I'm ready to enter the job market, I want to be creative. And so, when you're applying for positions, like, you have to apply, online, that's inevitable, right? That's just a process for a lot of these organizations. So what I'm going to assume here, so would I go through the application process and then email the hiring manager with like the link to the video? Like, I've already submitted all my applications via the traditional method, but I wanted to share in additional format. Is that how you would advise going about that?
I think for a specific job, absolutely. Like, that makes total sense. Hey, I applied, and here you go. Like, send me to the top of the pile. But I think you can also use it as just a prospecting and networking thing too. Before you apply to anything, you could use that to get somebody's attention, especially I'm thinking mostly in like a LinkedIn DM hiring perspective. Like I find a hiring manager I want to network with, I send that person a request, a message on LinkedIn, and here's a video kind of a thing. Or, you could do it via email as well, or any type of like warm introduction from the rest of your network. And that's just sort of like it's just showcasing like, all right, this person's on point. Like they're with technology. They're looking to stand out, and they got a great story.
Yeah, I love that. It's to be proactive in your search. So really playing a part. That's great. I really, really love that tip. Okay, so the next tip number 5, you talk about brushing up on basic cloud tech tools if you're not already. Can you elaborate on what that looks like?
Yeah, sure. So obviously, like in the last, couple of years, remote work has shifted into high gear. I run a remote team, so we're constantly using different technology solutions that are all cloud-based. And it's affected communication as well. So I think for kind of a seasoned professionals, being literate in the tools of the trade matter. And so, not all these tools are going to be utilized, by every job, but like being up on how to use the Google Suite or the Microsoft Online Suite, Slack and messaging platforms. Like I just see so many people throwing paragraphs, in Slack when it needs to be like just shorter and more concise and things like that. Project management tools that are all cloud-based, or other types of collaboration tools, just kind of showcase like you're out in front of this, what's going on, and you can thrive in a remote or hybrid type situation.
I really enjoy that word, thrive. You can thrive in both hybrid. And I think that's just the reality, right, of our workplace nowadays is the hybrid, and people kind of assume like, yeah, let's get on Zoom or Teams or WebEx, and just being able to navigate. So if you are not familiar or you haven't used it, I would say, a lot of these are free. Download the apps and just navigate and familiarize. Create a video on Zoom, maybe. That would be a great way to also get exposure to some of these tools. That's great. And those are things that people can add on their resume, right? Like that they have these technical skills.
Absolutely. They're hard skills that you can add. You can add them to LinkedIn. You can get, I know there's certifications out there even, you can spend a couple hours and go through tutorials and kind of come away with a certification that you can even put on your resume or on LinkedIn. So I think that's kind of well worth your time if you're not caught up on those things, and a specific company is utilizing a specific tool to be able to just be proactive with it, really signals that like you're kind of ahead of the pack, you're above the bar, and you're moving in the right direction. Yeah,
no, that's great. All right. So the next tip that you have is just such a great reminder, because when I work with, again, seasoned, established professionals, they always come up with their deficiencies, or like, oh, the younger people, and they have the energy and they have these new skills, but they always undervalue the skills that they do bring. So your 6th tip is to take advantage of your writing skills. Talk about the writing skills.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, this might not be on everybody's list, but I guess I think about, like, from a high level perspective, I think about like a guy like Jeff Bezos at Amazon. If people don't know this, like, he outlawed PowerPoint in executive presentations. And what he makes the executives do is write like a 2 to 5 page brief on whatever it is that they want to do. And the first piece of the meeting is dedicated to everybody reading that document and understanding it. So he thinks that you get more from, concise, clear writing, and that process helps you think more clearly. So that's why writing is important for kind of executive level functioning and judgment and critical thinking and all of those types of things, which we should be much better at than our younger counterparts. But also kind of going back to remote work and this just change in how we work, writing is much more important. And there's different mediums and formats for writing. So, as a remote company, most of what we get done is through email. It's through chat. It's through other types of written collaboration document work. Some of those cloud tools. And it's a little bit, it's interesting. It's just a little bit of a lost art to be able to write briefly, concisely, yet get all of the information and package it so it's scannable and logical.
Yeah.
Like it sounds like maybe that's not that big of a deal, but it really, really is in this fast-paced environment that we live in, to be able to, I don't want to sift through a chain, a 10-string chain of emails to get the 5 points of information that I need, right? It makes a big difference. And I think our generation and a little bit older, we have a leg up with that, because our competition, the youngers are writing in text, and they're not spelling things out, and not all of them obviously, but like that's kind of the culture that they've grown up in. And we have a real advantage in our ability to be able to put it all together and say, here you go. And man, when a manager is able to read through a one-page document and be like, oh yeah, got it covered, in 5 minutes without asking additional questions, like that's a huge, huge win.
Yeah. Can you share a few quick tips of how people can showcase their writing skills? I know you mentioned, email. What are some other ways that when people are applying to positions where they can really showcase that skill set?
Yeah, so I'll start by saying, it's part of our hiring process. So, we're a small team, but part of my hiring process when I'm talking to somebody, I'm evaluating writing skills from the very first email we share. And we will go back and forth on email before, I ultimately have a Zoom call or meet in person, because I want to see how responsive they are, how logically they can put material together, how they can convey a point, and all those kinds of things. Mm-hmm. So hiring managers are utilizing written tests and evaluating communication like that. So that's one way, is just straight up think about, you're being evaluated immediately when you start to communicate with somebody. But in terms of showcasing, again, I think LinkedIn is like really the best way. Like there are ways that you can put some of your work product, your previous work product, right there. Yep. If you have, a brief that you wrote, if you have a PowerPoint presentation that you created for something, and there's not, confidential information or whatever on there, like you can put it there. You can showcase those things as part of your work product, as part of your portfolio. If you do want to create content on that platform or any other platform, that is a way to do it as well. Like I have a personal website where I have kind of personal blog type stuff about my kids and those types of things. Like, I can showcase that to somebody and say, here's examples of my writing. And maybe that's a different form, but like people can get an idea of how I think, how I write, and how my thinking and communication has maybe evolved over time. So I think those are just, it's really fairly easy to get it out there if you have it in the first place.
Absolutely. Again, leveraging LinkedIn, being able to showcase your writing skills. There's so many avenues for that. And thank you for sharing about even you from the employer standpoint, is that initial email communication. I think that can be a deal breaker. So I'm glad that you shared that. Okay. So the last tip number 7, critical thinking. Can you unpack that a little bit?
Yeah. So it's really like about not being afraid to show that you can think critically, and maybe taking a little bit of risk to stand out. And so what I mean is, generally speaking, I think that there's a kind of a lack of really good, solid critical thinking skills sort of generally in our society today. And I think as older people, right, we should have a leg up in that we've been around the block, we've evaluated more situations, made more hard choices, made more wrong choices, and we need to bring that experience to bear. And so I think where I really think about doing this is more in an interview type process, where I just say, don't be afraid to take a risk in challenging somebody's point of view, especially like in a hiring situation. So you can do this through questions. Why did your company do this? Do X, Y, or Z, right? Have you thought about A, B, or C? Or even saying straight up like, that's interesting. I don't necessarily, or that's not the first thing that came to my mind. Or maybe I just flat out disagree with what you just said about a strategy or a tactic or something like that. I think like people are afraid to do that. People are afraid often to do that in an employee manager situation, right? We have a lot of yes people that just, well, what does the manager want? And we do that. But what leaders want, I think, at least in the companies that I work with, are, we don't know it all. We want people to chat. We want people to think deeply about a situation and challenge our assumptions or challenge our points of view so that we can all become better. And, I think the younger generations, again, I hate to paint broad brushes, but I think a lot of that can be almost quick reaction type stuff. If you get a challenge from a younger person in their 20s who hasn't maybe been around the block, it might just be a quick emotional, I don't like that, but they haven't thought it all the way through. But if you've got a really, sound, reasoned, thought out objection to something, that shows your thought process in the same way as your writing shows your logical thought process, or shows you care. You care enough to have researched the problem, developed your own point of view, saw where it maybe differed from the company's point of view, and then articulated it. And I think that stuff is just like worth its weight in gold.
Yeah, I really like that how you said, it's being able to show that you can bring the different type of insight, and especially like during a job interview, that's where you really can showcase it. And even the types of questions that you ask. Like for me, I just love when people ask really insightful questions, because it shows me, okay, they've done their research and they're really invested in the work that we do. So that really, the critical thinking can really come through even in the types of questions that they ask in an interview.
Yeah.
Great points. And I understand with the whole thing about like the different generations, but I think the point of today is really to talk about how, because I'm also over the age of 40, is like that we have some really, we have a lot of value that we bring because of our experience and our skill set and different kinds of things that we offer and that we bring to the table, and to not forget what those things are.
Yeah.
So I think that's great. All right. So those are the 7 tips. This is extremely helpful, and some sound bites that I think people can really use to, get that confidence and really know that they can be successful in entering the job market, making that career move, making that switch, and that there are things that you can do and that you have control over. As regardless of where you are age wise, and not let that be a barrier. Now, I want to mention one quick thing about this. I always feel, and I say this to people who are like, oh, I'm going to get discriminated. It's really about the organization too, right? So I want to work in an inclusive organization where they're going to be looking at what I do bring to the table, and not just make an assumption that I don't have something because of my age. So that's going to be important too. I mean, what are your thoughts around that?
Yeah, I think it's definitely tough. It's definitely, I don't have a whole lot of experience. I feel like having problems with that just based on where I've gotten my jobs or how I've created my opportunities. I do think what's interesting, at least from my perspective, maybe I'm biased, is the move to remote work, remote hiring, hybrid work, I think has put more of an emphasis on work product, meritocracy, in terms of like good quality work product. Like we can't babysit you, right, in your home. But if we get the output, like that's what we care about. And so I do think, and I haven't seen statistics on this, but my gut feel is that does level the playing field a little bit. I don't see you necessarily. I see your work output.
Yeah.
That's how I feel. Again, I lead a remote company. I work with a ton of just kick butt women all over the place, right? And you wouldn't know it. They just get it done, and it's phenomenal, right? And I'm not out there talking about who I hire and all these types of things. They just want to get the work done. They're moms. They have all this extra time because they're not commuting to work with the kids and do all of those types of things, and get it done at work. And I think, we don't have vacation policies. We don't have, again, we're small, but we don't have all these oversight things because the focus is on the work product and doing that. And I'm there to coach and help where needed. And they're the instruments. And so I guess that's my only comment is it just at a gut level feels like remote in some ways is leveling a playing field.
That's an interesting perspective. I hope that's true. And I really like that. And especially that's just kind of testament to even your own organization. Thank you for sharing that. Okay. So I'm going to conclude this, but I decided to add another question and that I will be asking my guests moving forward, and only because I was inspired. And I feel like having a podcast is to inspire people, right?
Yeah.
And so yesterday I attended an event where Jay Shetty was the keynote. And he mentioned that, we all need that daily inspiration. And he shared that at one point he listened to Steve Jobs' commencement speech for like 9 months in a row, because that was like his inspiration. So you are someone that is very driven, forward thinking, not afraid to, make career changes. Can you share, where do you find your inspiration? What's your go-to daily dose of inspiration, or weekly or whatever? I would love for you to share your inspiration, where you get your inspiration.
God, I get a lot from my kids, who you can see here, and thinking about like what I want to instill in them and how I would want them to be, I guess. So I do a lot of thinking about that. And then I just have like this saying around our teams, which is written on my whiteboard over here, which is resilience is brilliance. And I just think a lot about how I want to structure my life, how I want to structure my business, and the types of opportunities I want to create for people around me. And being resilient is a complete superpower, and it takes a lot of work. It's redundancies, it's not efficiency, but being able to build a resilient life is a really strong life. And so I just kind of strive to make decisions from a resiliency standpoint. And I think for whatever reason, I'm wired that way. And that having that approach has led me to I guess, not fear the pivot, and not fear trying something new. And so I think that that saying is inspirational to people and helps them think in a new way about the type of life that they want to live and the type of actions that they need to take, I guess. I'm
so glad I asked that question. That just such a beautiful response. Thank you so much for sharing that. Don't fear the pivot. I'm going to quote you and put a meme. No, that's great. Thank you. Thank you so much for your generosity and being here today and sharing your expertise. Now, how can people connect with you?
Yeah, sure. So I run a site called Careercloud, careercloud.com. I'm a podcast host there. You can, search us out on that site and listen in on the podcast. I also have a recently released newsletter called The Break. It's all about breaking your career, and then kind of picking up the pieces and finding what you want to do and what makes you tick. So all of that stuff can be found on the Careercloud website. I'm on Twitter at MN Gardon, Gardon. come hang out with me, talk to me, DM me. I'm happy to talk to anybody. And then you can find me on LinkedIn as well, where I put out a lot of content around the same types of topics, using, career pivots, utilizing freelance to kind of get out working on your own and create a resilient career.
Thank you so much, Mike. We'll stay connected.
Yeah, sounds great. Thanks so much for having me. I loved it.
Thank you.
All right.